Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I am your host, Apostate Aladdin. Please let me know if the live stream is working or not, because I am facing some technical difficulties. On today's live stream, I'm hoping to get callers who used to be a Muslim, left Islam, and then joined again. So, in other words, an ex-Muslim. I'm very curious to hear about your journey and what got you out of faith and what got you back into it. So if you would like to join as a caller, the link is pinned to the live chat. Now is your chance to join because we don't have any callers at the moment. So I urge you to join. Otherwise, if we don't get any callers, I will be taking comments and questions and everything in between. So try to think of something, brainstorm in case we don't get any callers, which I'm not expecting many today, unfortunately. So I think it was a while back that I used to be able to reach a bigger audience of believers on TikTok, but unfortunately I was removed from that platform multiple times because of false reporting by you-know-who. So I'm finding it more and more difficult to find Muslims who would like to talk on this show, not because they wouldn't like to. I mean, when they know about it, a lot of people join. But it's hard to know where to advertise this show because I've recently tried, or some of the followers of this channel have tried to advertise this particular live stream, and it was removed from those spaces. So if you have any ideas on how to get an audience of believers who would like to participate, please let me know. In the meantime, let me take some comments, and then if not, then if we don't get any callers today, then I'll just continue taking comments from the live chat. Doddery asks, ever plan to do debate reactions? I've done one or two in the past, and yeah, I don't know. They're just very time consuming, and I'm not always very interested in debates. If I had the time, I could, but for the time being, I think it's low on my priority list. Sheikh Raja says, turn this channel to Islamic, be Muslim again. Well, I would like to talk to people who did it so I could understand how they did it. Nim Grace says, why would anyone feel threatened by your program? I don't think they do feel threatened by my show specifically. I think it's just the first impression that people get is someone who has apostate in their name probably doesn't mean well, is how they view it. Let me talk about that for a second. So, actually, no, I want to answer a comment first. Lord Seed says, it feels like with the new atheist movement running out of steam, people care more about picking a political identity group. I can't speak much to the new atheist movement in general because I don't necessarily feel like I am part of it, even though I might be. I feel like we had different circumstances that got us to start a movement, and the Exmuslim movement is not running out of steam. I think it's just beginning to gain steam. But I can't say much about the new atheist movement. Anyway, what was I saying before that? Yeah, so recently someone was suggesting that I speak to a certain Muslim YouTuber, and I took a look at a video that they did, an interview that they did with an ex-Muslim, and in the title it was something along the lines of deceptive ex-Muslim gets schooled or something along those lines. And it irked me so much, not just the title of the video, but the fact that all the comments were in kind, and the creator of the video, of the person who runs the channel, was agreeing with all these comments. And it wasn't because the person he was talking to was deceptive. It was because the person he was talking to was an ex-Muslim. So I think when Muslims come across live streams like mine, they're expecting to be treated the way that they or other Muslims would treat ex-Muslims. But that's not how it works here. I don't title my videos Muslim gets disproven and humiliated and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. I try to engage with the person with respect and not make a joke or a mockery out of them. But it's difficult to gain an audience when you don't have provocative titles and provocative stances like that. But anyway, that's besides the point. May Summer asks, are there really people that leave Islam just to come back. Um, as one of the volunteers working on this channel actually just brought up a similar point. Um, they said, what if the fact that you can't find a lot of callers for this specific demographic is because there aren't that many people who leave Islam and come back? And I think it's tempting to say that that's probably it, but I think there's more to it than that. We can't say for sure. So I don't know if there are people that leave Islam and come back. I know that they exist. I just don't know how prevalent that is, and I don't know why they left and joined again. I've only had perhaps a conversation or two with one person in the past, not as Aladdin, but that was way before I had a YouTube channel. And they seem to have returned as a Quranist, Sufi sort of Muslim. And in our discussion, I wasn't yet an ex-Muslim, but I had a lot of contentions with the religion that I felt that their position didn't clarify enough for me. So I'm very curious to hear from those people. Mayim says, I left Islam, went back to it, then left it again a few months ago. I went back to it that time because of fear of hell. If God is real, then I won't go to hell. And if he isn't real, then I lost nothing. So I hear that sentiment a lot of, if God is real, then I lose everything. But if God is not real, then I lose nothing, just behaving like a Muslim just in case he is real. I don't think that's exactly how it works either, because it's difficult to behave as if you believe if you don't believe. I mean, isn't that what a munafiq is? To be a hypocrite or to pretend? And also, that's I think a version of Pascal's wager of, if I believe in God, at least I'm saved if God turns out to be real. But like many people have said before, when you're thinking about Pascal's wager, you're not taking into account every other religion to ever exist and every other version of God that will possibly be more angry at you for being Muslim than if you were non-Muslim. But I understand where that reaction would come from and why it seems almost safer to just go back to what you were taught, that, in case hell is real. But I don't want to say too much about it before we have a caller, and it seems like we might have one caller. We'll see if that pans out. I don't want to voice my thoughts on the topic of leaving Islam and returning to it before we have a caller, because I don't want to make them feel as if they have to argue against something I said. I want to hear their stories first. Let me read some more comments. This is also another sentiment that I hear a lot. Tahayim Vid says, I've been tempted to come back, but more so cultural, to smooth things over so my life is easier. I don't believe in any of it, of course. Leah says, hi, I think that they come back because there isn't a reason good enough to leave Islam, respectfully. I think that I've heard this kind of sentiment from Christians as well before, when they say, I used to be an atheist and then I used to be a Christian, I became an atheist and then I joined again. And a lot of the times when you talk to them, it doesn't really sound like they were an atheist. It sounds like they were away from their faith and then felt guilty about it and came back to it. I don't think that there has to be a good reason to leave necessarily, because when we look at what religion demands, and again, I don't want to say too much before we get a caller, but here's my 2 cents on that. There is no predication that you need to join Islam for a good reason at all. You can join Islam because you had struggles in your life, or your family had struggles, and then you see that this is a way of life that works for you, or you think God's going to save you. You don't have to write a dissertation about why Islam is true, why Islam makes sense to join Islam, and everyone celebrates you for it. But when someone is about to leave the religion, they're expected to prove empirically that the religion is false before they leave, and that's not how it works. What has never been proven does not need to be disproven, is how I feel about that. Sheikh Raja says, when it comes to authenticity, all other religion gets eliminated except Islam. I would actually love to talk to Sheikh Raja because I see you being a recurring commenter on the stream. What does authenticity mean? And is authenticity a metric for how you judge the truthfulness of something? Um, I would like to know what you think of those questions. What does it mean, authenticity? Have you heard about Jabrani says, have you heard about Suraj Hayani? He's a famous Arab YouTuber who criticized Islam. He's now back to Islam. Yes, so I have thoughts on what he said so far, but I'm waiting to hear all of the upcoming videos that he promises he's going to make. Um, because from what he described so far, it doesn't quite make sense to me because he describes a lot of reasons for believing that he himself had said to be bad reasons. And it's not that he changed his mind that bothers me about his story. It's how dismissive he was of his previous position, and also how dismissive he was as an ex-Muslim of believers. Like, he gave me this vibe that he thinks he's better than everyone in a sense. Like, he dismisses other people's beliefs as, how could you think that? How could you be so silly? And then when he switched sides, somehow he does it to ex-Muslims, and he thinks that he's entitled to do that because he used to be one, for example, when I would actually expect the opposite. Like, if someday I returned to Islam, you wouldn't hear me come out here and say, every person that doesn't believe doesn't have a good reason to not believe, and their ideas are rotten, fasida, like he says. I wouldn't say that stuff. I would understand. I used to not believe, and here's how I came back. That would be my focus of talking about it. So I'm waiting for his videos where he maybe says something of that sort. As of right now, what he said didn't make much sense to me, but Costina said, I left something Islamic for Christ. I was very committed, but I studied the Christian faith because I wanted to convert more people and to know more. It took long for my heart to leave, though. I would be interested in talking to you if you would like to join the live stream. So I'm curious to hear more from you. Seems like we have one caller who's currently being verified. Yes, I can do that for the caller. So if you would like to join as a caller, if today's topic is something that pertains to you, if you are someone who has left the religion and then came back to it, I would love to hear more from you. Link to join the call is pinned to the live chat. Mayim says, I hope to be able to join a live someday. I'm just too awkward and I ramble too much, sadly. It's funny how everyone who joins says the same thing, that they're rambling too much and they're nervous. So don't overthinking. Don't overthink it. Just join whenever you feel comfortable to. Taha says, my mom and dad are very religious, and because of Palestine, they expect me to present my Arabness more. Acting Muslim makes focusing on my studies better. Wait, I didn't understand that last part, but I understand the identity part. That's unfortunate. And again, it's not a topic that I talk about much, but it's a struggle to be seen as the Palestinian issue to be seen as an Islamic issue or a religious issue. I don't think it is. There is a caller, and I'm going to take the caller next, so please, caller, be ready, because I'm adding you to the live stream soon, but I'd like to answer this last comment. Abu Nazir says, what if you left Islam because of anxiety and OCD? That's a good question. What if? So say I am someone who has anxiety and OCD. I think most of us can agree it's not self-inflicted, at least not consciously. I don't think anyone chooses to give themselves anxiety or OCD or whatever other mental health issue. So say I have that for no fault of my own. Actually, the way that Allah ordained it to happen, the way that Allah planned it would happen. And Allah knew that this person, because of, as you say, anxiety or OCD, will leave the religion. Why would Allah take offense to that? Like, say that's not a good enough reason for you. It's so bizarre to me that Allah doesn't feel like we're entitled to proof. We're just supposed to believe based on stories and based on loose logic about how the world needs a creator, therefore it's my creator. But when it comes to the other way around, someone having a mental health issue that caused them to not believe, the way that you put it, is a fault of their own. I don't see how that works that way. And if someone were to join Islam because they have OCD, for example, or they need structure, would people then criticize them for joining for the wrong reasons? Anyway, I think the caller is ready, so I'm taking the caller now. Epicurious, I hope that you're ready because I'm adding you to the live stream now. Hey, can you hear me?
If someone were to join.
Can you say that again?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Welcome to the stream.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here. I think I joined once before.
Yeah, I think we've spoken before.
Yeah.
Can you remind me what we spoke about last time?
I think I just brought up the science in the Quran and some arguments about that previously.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wasn't really sure if this counts as on topic. So just I grew up in a Muslim family. I was Muslim. In around my teenage years, I left Islam. Just a lot of things didn't make sense to me, and started to question it. Decided to leave, and later tried to join. In fact, tried to join many times, but just ultimately sort of failed. So I kind of figured I could give some reasons as to why I wanted to go back to Islam.
So can you start by telling me what it is that got you to leave Islam in the first place?
Well, for the most part, I'm not Arab speaking, so reading the Quran, we only ever learned how to read Arabic, never actually read the meaning. So eventually, when I started reading like the Quran in the English translation, a lot of it just didn't sit right to make sense with me. But I was always really interested in history and science, and comparing that with stuff I was learning in school and stuff, there was a lot of contradictions. So that kind of really made me start questioning. And then I kind of watched a lot of YouTube videos with like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, and they sort of made me question a lot as well. And ultimately, it just didn't make it just stopped making sense. If that makes any sense.
So I have a question for you before you continue. Was it that you were questioning the idea of God in general? I mean, if you were listening to Richard Dawkins, I presume that was more of it, but tell me, was it about doubting God or doubting religion or doubting Islam?
So at first it just started off with doubting Islam because I didn't grow up in a Muslim country, so a lot of my friends were Hindus and Christians. So we used to I used to see their celebrations and stuff. So we'd have discussions, and they'd ask me questions, and I didn't really know how to answer them in a way that kind of made Islam sound reasonable. Because you have in Islam, if you're polytheist, you're going to hell, and if you're Hindu, a friend asks you, "What happens to me when I die in Islam?" There's no nice answer to give him. So I started off with just questioning Islam, and then I kind of through that started watching YouTube videos, started reading about religion and in general, and that kind of got me to question religion, and then through that also kind of question the existence of any gods.
Okay. It's interesting how I face the same issue. It's when you try to describe what you believe to other people who don't believe the same thing, that's when you're first exposed to how it sounds like to an outsider. I mean, it's easy enough to tell another Muslim something and they would nod along and say, yeah, that makes sense. But once you tell it to someone who doesn't believe, that's the first time possibly that you realize that it sounds ridiculous to them, even if it might not be ridiculous to you, but that can be difficult to navigate. So then you you left
Yeah.
Islam
Um,
at the time?
yeah, so I kind of left Islam, left religion in general. The, I became pretty agnostic atheist after that. And around like my late teenage years, we moved to a Muslim majority country. And during that time, I tried to, I would being so surrounded by Islam and everyone now in the community basically being Muslim. Uh, I tried to, I thought maybe there was something to this. Maybe there was because basically just to fit into the community, I tried to like reconnect. Um, it didn't really go well because, I tried to, in my head, justify or um, come up with an excuse about, oh, uh, this is metaphorical in the Quran. Maybe the Quran is just uh, like it's not meant to be taken literally. There's trying to rationalize it, saying, well, I'm not religiously Muslim, but I'm culturally Muslim, that sort of thing. Um, and also like pressure from my family was constantly saying like, you know, if like you should convert to Islam and do this and like, you know, trying to bring me back. So I tried to do it, but ultimately there was just a lot of like the cognitive dissonance just didn't sit right, and ultimately that failed.
So you failed to return back to religion?
Yeah, basically. One of the big things as well. I was in a Muslim country. Like all of my friends were Muslim, and uh, even started a relationship with a girl who was Muslim. And she was like, "Well, I can't marry someone who's an ex-Muslim." And at that age, I was pretty young, and so I was like, "Well, maybe I didn't understand the Quran. Maybe there's you know just trying to get back into it didn't really at the end it's like it's I don't know how you if you stop believing something if there's a way for you to go back into believing something that you've reasoned yourself out of.
Yeah, I was under the impression that you went back to Islam, um, but you're saying you tried and it didn't work.
Yeah, basically. I used to be kind of say that okay, the the Quran is or is like there's an maybe there is a like a creator kind of like a god of like Einstein's God, like Spinoza or something, like maybe there is some sort of creator, and the Quran is just a book that was written by people, but there's good and bad things, sort of like what Jordan Peterson does with the Bible, and trying to cherry pick out verses and stuff that have hidden meanings. But ultimately, even through all of that, it just I find it very difficult to try and reason myself back into being Muslim because I think once you start believing in something, uh, I don't know how you could start believing in that again. It's like starting to believe in Santa Claus if once you know there's no Santa Claus.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I am inclined to believe that I don't think I don't think it's very likely that I would ever return to the religion, but I'm curious to hear from those who found a way back to explain what worked for them. So you said that um, you tried to figure out the meanings of words or find possible misunderstandings that could make Islam seem suspicious to you, but turn out to mean something else, and that didn't solve it for you. You tried to believe in some sort of general Spinoza's God. So
Yeah,
what?
I
Yeah.
think.
Mm.
Sorry, go ahead.
You go first.
I think the main thing that made me want to rejoin being Muslim was just because when you're surrounded by in Islamic culture, uh, you know, with in a Muslim community, there's so much, and you're not Muslim. This you just to be part of that community was a big pull towards Islam, just to fit into that community. So even though I didn't believe, I really wanted to, just so that I could, be a part of the the, the community that I was in.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
So it wasn't because Islam was convincing to you, but because it would make your life easier if you were a Muslim.
Basically, yeah. It's still something that like I kind of like think about and struggle today with like, and if only I could believe life would be so much easier with my family, with friends, because a lot of my family and friends are Muslim and they don't really like the fact that I'm not Muslim, so that's kind of affected a lot of relationships and stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was a big goal for me, but ultimately it's just like you couldn't reason myself to believe something that I just ultimately didn't.
Do you feel glad or sad that, or some other feeling that you couldn't believe in Islam again?
Um, well, in a way, I feel glad because of there's a lot in Islam that I find just really, you know, abhorrent, I guess is the only word I could explain it. But um, all Muslim people aren't necessarily all like that, or don't necessarily all believe those horrible things. And so, just for the connection that you have to your community, to your family and stuff, I do sometimes miss not having the belief or the ability to believe in that.
Hmm. So if you were to give any advice to someone who was in the position that you were in, trying to return back to Islam, and I'm not saying necessarily advice to dissuade them, I'm just saying in general, if you were to give them some words of advice based on your experience, what would you say?
Um, I'd say I guess it's every person's different. So um, if leaving Islam is something that's really going to affect your life and your family's life, and that's something that you don't want to happen, I can understand why you wouldn't want that. Then I would say, just follow what feels right to you, or feels best to you. If you know that leaving Islam is going to cause you to lose, really close family, really close friends, and that's something you can't bear to do, yeah, I would say don't. But ultimately you have to make the choice yourself.
So you're saying follow what makes your life better?
Follow what you think is right is what I'm saying. What your priorities are. Um, that I guess that's all anyone can do.
So in your case, would you say, are you saying that it was a problem of priority and that's why you didn't return to Islam because you didn't prioritize your family more than your beliefs?
Um, no, I'd say it's in a sense. I could I guess to the family members that and friends that did sort of like cut me off when I stopped believing. When I left Islam, I could say they weren't. Um, that's kind of conditional. But in my mind, it's like, well, if they only want to see you as family on the condition of you believing in Islam, then how much do they really care? But to me, it uh, yeah, I guess the wasn't able I just wasn't able to live with the sort of cognitive dissonance and all the contradictions that would come with having to force myself into believing in Islam.
Okay.
Um,
What helped you make a decision one way or another to end the thinking about returning back?
Sorry, could you repeat that question? My headphones cut out.
Mhm. What made you make a decision and leave that state of indecision and not being sure whether you should return or not?
Ultimately, I just decided. Not decided. It's just I couldn't. Um, I couldn't force myself to believe something that I didn't, or pretend to believe in something that I didn't believe. Couldn't like force myself to, pretend to fast during Ramadan, for example, or force myself to pretend like I'm praying 5 times a day. I felt like that would be lying to myself and lying to my family, which is something I just didn't want to do. Uh, so yeah, I kind of just accepted it, and my family, who is okay with me being not Muslim, stuck around, and the ones that don't really speak to me that much or like interact that much, and that's fine.
So it was realizing that you have to be true to yourself and you can't pretend to pray all the time.
Pretend to believe as well, yeah. Just there's a lot more than prayer, but it's like small things as well, like how we say inshallah, like that's something my family loves saying, and I kind of grew up saying, and then there were times when I'd say it and I'd just be like, why are you saying this? You don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a lot of non-Muslims and maybe even Muslims themselves might not realize how much of a believer's personality and day-to-day life and language, lexicon, how much of it is affected by religion, even if you're not actively doing an act of worship. So if someone doesn't believe anymore, they quickly pick up on how frequently religion makes its way into conversation, a conversation that has nothing to do with religion. So it becomes very difficult to play the act of a believer, even if it's not just about, praying on time.
Yeah. Exactly. It was really weird, like the smallest things, like saying Alhamdulillah after like, and you just like it's just in your head that you kind of feel like you don't believe this. It's why are you saying it? So it kind of creates a cognitive dissonance, and it's just like I can't do this anymore.
Do you feel better now that you are no longer trying to force yourself to return?
Yeah, I do. I feel, like it's a lot off my mind that I don't have to, pretend or try and, do something that I don't believe in. It's a lot more refreshing. There is always the feeling of, uh, the loss of people and community, but you learn to build new relationships, new community over time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's something I think everyone just has to decide for themselves what's right for them. And yeah,
I honestly, I would advise anyone who's stuck in that position of not knowing what they believe or wanting to return to their beliefs after abandoning them. My advice would be if that indecision or that in between is affecting your health negatively, then research it, then do something about it. Take an active role in trying to understand what it is that you believe or you're supposed to believe and why you're supposed to believe it in the first place. Because being in that in between state might be very exhausting. So, my advice would be if that is exhausting you, then take action. And I'm not saying then stop considering returning to Islam, but do something about it. Address the problems that you're facing or the obstacles that are preventing you from returning to Islam, and then make a decision about them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I understand like being an ex-Muslim, you can, especially if you haven't, told anyone yet and you're still exploring, it can be kind of difficult. So, um, yeah, just, if that's putting your life in danger or anything, just always, your life comes first.
Mhm. Was there anything that you want to ask me or say to me?
Um, I guess, yeah, I guess well, I was gonna ask you the advice, like, what advice you would give for someone in the position that I was in. So I think you've already answered the question. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's just
Yeah, I'm kind of speaking from experience here. Not that I left Islam and then wanted to return, but that I was in that in between of not knowing what I believe or what my label is. When someone would ask me, "Are you Muslim?" I would say it's complicated. So I wasn't happy being in that state forever. So I'm glad that I made a decision about it eventually, an informed decision. It wasn't that I just willy nilly just woke up and said, you know what, I'm done with this confusion, which, not discrediting anyone who does it that way, but yeah, I'm glad that I'm no longer in that in between.
same. I did just want to say that to like the Muslim apologists that say that ex-Muslims only leave Islam because they want to follow their desires and do haram things. Just I can promise you that is not the case for a lot of us, especially like me. Some of us really do want to believe and have wanted to believe for a really long time, and there's just a lot of reasons why we can't. So, yeah, just be nice.
Yeah, I think that's it's very hard to argue against someone who employs that reasoning, because by that reasoning it makes you feel guilty about anything that you want, whether it's halal or haram, because they define it as, if you do anything that you desire that is not what Islam commands you to, then you're worshiping your desires or you're worshiping yourself. When that's not, in fact, what's happening. Like, what are you supposed to do when you're no longer Muslim? Just live in misery? Like, no. What's wrong with following your desires if they don't harm you or anyone else? So don't listen to that kind of language about characterizing your actions as worshiping something other than Allah, because that's not how it works in reality. That's just how it's portrayed from a believer's point of view.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're no longer in that in between, and I'm glad that you have that clarity, that you're not stuck in that state of indecision anymore.
yeah. Yeah. Me too. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
Of course. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. You too.
Bye bye. Thank you, Epicurious, for joining. I'm still waiting on other callers. We do have some people who um, join the back room, but they're not the right kind of caller today. So let me expand it a little bit. If you left religion and came back to it, you can call in and tell me why. What made you leave religion and what made you come back to it? Because I am curious to know. What else can I talk about? So, in the meantime, till we wait till the next caller can join, and I'm probably gonna do this differently next time. So going forward, if I have a topic like this one where I'm not expecting a lot of callers, I will post about it in the community post section of my channel, and I will ask people to click the link to join and get verified and screened ahead of time so that we can agree on a time that they're going to be there, because I know it can be difficult to find the right kind of caller sometimes. For some streams, we get tons of callers, but for ones like these, it's more difficult to find someone who has left Islam and came back to it. But I hope they're out there, and I hope that they find their way to this live stream. What else? And let me know in the comments in the live chat if there's anything that you'd like to talk about in the meantime. I'm seeing a lot of arguments about labeling Islam as a cult. I often hear that from followers of other religions, and I don't necessarily disagree. I just want to know if they think the same of other religions as well. So a commenter is asking, that's a very good question. Where can I sign up for these calls? As of right now, you don't need to sign up in advance or anything. The link is pinned to the live chat. And once you click on the link, you'll be talking to one of our moderators who is just going to make sure, you know, what you want to talk about. They're going to have a short chat with you, and then you'll be queued to join the live stream. So it's pretty easy. You could also, T-Rex says, just open the stream up to more general calls if you run out of callers on topic. Yeah, and I suppose that's what I'm going to do now, since we're not getting any callers at the moment. If you would like to talk about anything else, click the link pinned in the live chat and let me know what you would like to talk about. Thank you again, Kikno, for gifting 5 people memberships. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure they do as well. It's funny how sometimes it's YouTube selects who gets these memberships, and often it's just people who comment the most. Sometimes it's people who it's their first time on the channel, and before they know it, they're a member. So thank you for gifting them memberships. Spencer's asking, now a member, thanks to the gifts, tell me why Islam is not a cult. I didn't say it wasn't. Actually, like Darth Funk here says, it's mushy. It's used more commonly as a pejorative. I think it qualifies to be a cult based on the definition of a cult and based on how a person practices it. So not everyone might perceive it to be a cult. Some people might be followers of Islam, but followers in such a way that it doesn't qualify as a cult. But I think essentially it does qualify for that definition, but so do other religions. So usually when I hear Islam is a cult, often it's said by, from my experience at least, it's been said by Christians. And I don't necessarily disagree that Islam can be a cult or is fundamentally a cult, but so is Christianity. But it all depends on how you practice it. Abu Nazr says, there were instances where I had dreams of hell. I thought it must be a sign I should return. Funnily enough, when I was Muslim, I'd be having dreams about Jesus. I've spoken about this before. I've had dreams about hell before leaving. I've had dreams about hell after leaving. And I eventually realized that it was more about my stress than actually hell in any way. So, yeah. Antandre sucks. I don't know who Antandre is, and I'm not saying they suck, but that's the username. Have you already discussed the controversy with Ayan Hirsi Ali? No, I haven't. So here's what I think. I read her article. That's as much as I know about it. And from her article, I couldn't see anything that she described as a reason to return, or her, explaining why she sorry, not return, to join Christianity. I said return because I'm thinking about today's topic of the live stream. She hasn't really, from my point of view, adequately explained what is compelling to her about Christianity, except for the political aspect. So the way that I interpreted what she said is that she's worried that Islam is gaining political power in the West, and she doesn't see any way of stopping it except basically the people who are on the Christian right side of politics. That's what I interpreted from what she said. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't see anything about what made sense to her about Christianity, or except maybe some vague notion of Judeo-Christian values. So yeah, I don't know if I'm really giving any commentary here, but I hope, I was expecting to see more about Christianity itself, not politics. PTND is asking a question. A very common apologetic is taking a look at the world around you and concluding it must have a creator, like watches, animals, and people should also have a designer. Thoughts? So the difference between a watch and the earth, or humans, is we've observed watches being made, and we've never observed a watch, as far as we know, in the wild that just occurred that way. Let me rethink this for a second, because at the end of the day, what I usually think about is, I'm not against the idea that there could be some sort of intelligent design behind all of this, or some sort of designer. I am struggling to wrap my head around how things came to be the way that they are. Was it about the initial conditions? Was it about some kind of order that finds its way through the randomness? Or is it just about randomness? I genuinely don't know. But it doesn't make a lick of difference to me. I find it to be a pointless conversation. It's like arguing about... It's like as if we were arguing about whether or not water is good for you. Okay, but what does that say about water being my God's divine gift to earth? Nothing at all. So we could argue all day about whether or not the universe could exist without a creator or designer, but I find it to be a distraction from the question, what makes you think that you know something about that designer that we don't? That's the part that matters most to me. I would not be surprised if, suddenly we're given the information that this was all some kind of lab simulation, or that there is a God and this God was testing us for something or another, or that the God doesn't even care about us. I wouldn't be surprised by any of those outcomes. I would be totally surprised if it was one of the religions that we've heard of, because then I'd have 1,000,001 questions about, why didn't you make it any clearer? Why use these methods of communication? But the possibility of a creator or a designer existing is not one that I discount, and I don't care to argue against it, is what I usually think. Bilal asks, will you be making videos about science and predictions in Quran and Sunnah? There's a video that's been on my mind for a while. I'll tell you the outline of it so you can do some research, and it'll convey the similar idea. There's this notion that Islam is true because the Quran has certain scientific tidbits of information that no one could have possibly known at the time of the Prophet, which is false for so many reasons. Not only does the Quran not convey any information that people have then used to build on their knowledge and discover something new, but also everything mentioned, like, it's either that it could vaguely be interpreted as something that we later discovered, and that's not really scientific information in any way, or it's something that people already knew, or it's incorrect information that people have been relaying for a while. And Muslims interpret it as incredible that they could have had this knowledge. So what I urge you to do is look up all the scientific discoveries and inventions from thousands of years before Muhammad. And you'll realize that humans weren't just dumb shepherds walking around the desert aimlessly. They had discovered a lot of things since before Muhammad, way more impressive than what Muslims tout to be scientific discovery in the Quran. So this image that we have of people being cavemen up until the moment that Islam came around and said, here's something about the ocean, and that was incredible, that is a very false notion. So I urge you to look into the list of inventions and scientific discoveries from thousands of years before Muhammad. It will blow your mind to realize how much knowledge people had at the time, but it wasn't always disseminated the same way that we share knowledge now, of course. So sometimes knowledge was discovered and then lost and then rediscovered somewhere else, or built on hundreds of years later. It's incredible when you learn about all of this. Once you learn how much humans have discovered and done over the years, it'll sound laughable and silly to you, the idea that it's impressive that a human could have known how many bones are in the body incorrectly at the time of Muhammad. Anyway, Iman Yan said, converting to Christianity is not on the mind of the average ex-Muslim or someone on the edge like me. I'm not sure if they were responding to another comment, but yeah, that is probably true. What's next? So we had a bunch of callers, but none of them actually panned out. So if you'd like to join as a caller, link is still pinned to the live chat. Bun Chan says, hi, I know it's not the topic, but your name always reminds me of Aladdin from Disney. You do look like him. For copyright infringement reasons, I'm going to say I don't know who you're talking about. But wouldn't that be funny if someone from Disney tried to sue me for copyright infringement for using an Arabic name? That would be hilarious, but hopefully that doesn't happen. Or if it does, that would be interesting. Maybe that's the that will boost our voices as ex-Muslims if I had some kind of drama with Disney. So make it happen. A-T-Rex about commenting about one of my previous answers. We identify what things are designed by contrasting them to what occurs without design. What do we compare the universe in? Sorry, to determine design. In order to determine design. I was kind of getting to that point, but I forgot and I made another one. So thank you. Yeah, watches, we know what other watches look like and we know that they're designed. We don't know what universes look like if they're not designed or if they are designed. Baldwin says, I will send you 2 camels if you take your mask off. I imagine camels are expensive, so, DM me. We'll talk. Send me the value of the camels, tax-free, because, no, don't trick me like that. Sven says, atheism and anti-theism aren't the same thing, but that doesn't mean anti-theists aren't a thing. I agree. PTND says, thanks Aladdin. Another possible reason, the Quran is more miraculous than other holy books. It is preserved perfectly and written in perfect linguistic style. Do you find this compelling? So, to point out what Roxanne says, Hamza Tsoris accepts scientific miracles of the Quran is no longer valid. I've seen that sentiment among more educated Muslims. So anyway, going back to PTND's question, the Quran is more miraculous than other holy books. It is preserved perfectly. So there's a lot to be said about the perfect preservation of the Quran, like the fact that we do have multiple versions of the Quran right now that do disagree slightly, and Muslims would dismiss these disagreements as inconsequential, but there are, I believe, examples where the meaning is changed, like qatilu versus iqtulu, fight versus kill. There are things that are different in the versions that we have right now, but that's all besides the point. We don't know what the Quran was when it was allegedly revealed. We only know what was preserved when burning, or the versions that remained after burning all the other versions. And there's nothing miraculous about, even if it was preserved from the day that the people around the Prophet wrote it down, is that really a criteria for what makes something miraculous? So I feel like this is working backwards. If we lived in a reality where several religions had books that were exactly preserved letter for letter since thousands of years, or maybe in a few thousand years, we'll have religions that have remained for thousands of years, preserved letter for letter, then Muslims wouldn't say, well, we have the preservation. So I feel like that's the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Like you have a target, or you have, what's the analogy here? It's like you go to a forest and you shoot at a tree, shoot an arrow at a tree, and once it hits a tree, you draw the circles around it and say, aha, it hit it right in the middle. Or actually, that's not exactly the analogy. Basically, if you see an arrow hit in the middle of a target zone, then you might presume that the archer was so precise and talented that they hit it right in the middle, but it could have just been drawn around it. And I think that's what's happening. Muslims notice that this is one feature that Islam is unique in to some extent, what they call preservation of the Quran. And then they say, well, that's criteria right there for miraculousness. But independently, aside from other religions, is that criteria for the religion being true? It's difficult to argue against it because they see the prevalence of the book and what they think is preservation of the book, and it seems compelling from an insider's point of view. But from an outsider's point of view, both of these things could be 100% true and has nothing to do with the truthfulness of the book. Even if no other religion has those features, it still has nothing to do with the truthfulness of the claims made in the book. And about the perfect linguistic style, I've never found that compelling. And a lot of Arabs will tell you it's so much rambling. Like if you think the English translation is disconnected or doesn't make sense how it jumps between topics, it's the same in Arabic. It's not miraculous, and it's also something that is confusing to me. If I were to present Islam to a non-Muslim, a non-Arab non-Muslim, and I tell them, you should join my religion because A, the book has been preserved, and especially say that was happening 200 years ago. I tell the non-Muslim, you should join my religion because our book has been preserved for 1,000 years. They'd say, I don't understand these markings on your book. I don't speak your language. I can't verify that it was preserved or not. I don't think even you can. We'd have to go to so many libraries and make trips around the world to test that assertion. How do I even verify this made-up criteria for divinity? And then putting that aside, the non-Arab would ask you, okay, how do you prove to me that it's linguistically beautiful and miraculous, and what do I do with that information? So if the truthfulness of Islam is based on how beautifully eloquent the Arabic language is and how preserved it is, neither of those things can be demonstrated to someone just, before the internet, can be reasonably demonstrated to someone who's interested in joining the religion. So why is God's best criteria for proving the religion reliant on one specific language and the internet? It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I hope that answers that. Let me keep up with the comments again. So it doesn't seem like we're getting any new callers today. Again, last call. If you'd like to join as a caller, now is your time to do so. Let me talk for a second. This is something that I was having a discussion about this earlier today, and it would make more sense if there's someone to talk about this with, but it's just me today, so you just have to hear me ramble. I am not sure if people have free will, the way that we understand free will. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. But first, let me answer this comment. Peace Germany Mapper, please answer me. Imagine there is a God, what will you do? If you don't want to believe, you go to hell. So imagine there's a God, what will you can do then? So if you don't want to believe, that I feel like that's a loaded statement right there. It's not about wanting to believe. If God demonstrated that God exists right now, I would ask it, okay, well, thank you, first of all. Finally, where the hell have you been? And what makes someone who believed that you exist without this demonstration better than someone who needed this demonstration? Because what if I believed in the wrong religion? And then from there, I'd ask, so which religion is yours, and how come there's so many of them? Can you please explain to me all of that? It won't be that I don't want to believe. I mean, I have no choice but to believe. I believe it. Just like right now, I have no choice but to disbelieve. It's the conclusion that I came to. So I would ask God questions. That is my first impression, would be, tell me more. This is amazing. I can't believe that this is actually happening. Please do tell me more. And it won't change how I feel about how bizarre it is that God demands worship or else he's going to torture us. I mean, that's psychopathic behavior. That won't change. I'll do it because I know it's going to happen, but it's not going to change how I feel about it unless God gives me an explanation for it. So I would be really happy to actually see God exist and talk to us about it. This fear, basing religion on fear is actually, it's not such a good point when you think about it that way. So the person who asked the question, and so many believers, the reason you believe is because you're afraid of torture. What does God gain from that? From not demonstrating their existence, from playing a game of broken telephone, and then terrorizing us into doing things a certain way to please him, just out of fear. I don't understand. So to answer one of the commenters, You would be. I might see some of your information if you become a patron, but that remains private. I don't post names anywhere or anything like that. So if you would like to be a supporter and you're worried about privacy, rest assured that I won't credit you in the end credits unless I explicitly get your consent for that. So do not worry about that. And if you'd like to join as a patron or YouTube member, that will entitle you to join the Discord server once we get to verify you on the Discord server as well. And that is a growing community that I urge you to be a part of. So what was I saying before that? Oh, it looks like we have a caller that's being verified right now. What was I saying? Yeah, about free will. I don't know if we have free will. And hear me out. Say you have two footballs and you throw them at each other. You have two people in a room throwing the footballs at each other. Every time the balls hit each other, they will separate in a different way than the time before it. That's because you have two humans, and humans cannot be precise in the way that they throw to the point that the balls will bounce off of each other the same exact way every time. But if you could control the way that you're throwing the balls at each other, you can predict their movement. Moreover, if you can observe before the balls are even thrown at each other, how they're thrown, and if you can calculate air resistance, if you can account for every factor in that room, you can calculate how those balls will bounce off of each other. I see that as an analogy for everything. Any decision that you make, just the impulses of feeling hunger, all of that is a result of so many interactions of chemicals, of biology, of other things that are happening around you. I think that if you knew all the factors in the world, if you understood and could compute all that knowledge, you would predict what's going to happen in the next moment. In that sense, I don't think that anyone has any free will. I think that we're all acting out what is expected if one had a top-down view of everything. You could think of God having that knowledge. Like if this were a simulation, God has infinite computing power, infinite storage. God knows the position of every single atom and subatom in the universe, and God can predict what the next outcome is going to be based on that. Taking all that into consideration, why would God get pissed off if someone doesn't believe in God when God predicted that and knows all the factors that led someone to not believe? Or anything else? Why would God have any emotional reaction, aside from the fact that many religions, including Islam, might even claim that God wrote and willed things to happen a certain way? Even if that's not the case, if God is just such a very good predictor of outcome, why would God be emotionally upset at anything that happens as a result of factors that he knew about? So that is what strikes me as odd. Whether or not we have free will, God having knowledge of what's going to happen next, or God being intelligent enough to predict what's going to happen next and understand the factors behind it, makes it seem impossible that God would then, like a human, take it very personally and be offended when someone's outcome didn't match what God wanted it to be, despite expecting it to disappoint him from the first place. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but it's something that crossed my mind today, or often, honestly. I don't know about you, let me know in the comments, but do you find that the way that you view the world as an ex-Muslim is a lot more laborious and how do I phrase this? Growing up, I've always had a certain version of reality that I was expected to believe in. Like I was expected to believe that if you pray to God, either God answers or defers giving you what you asked for, or maybe gives it in heaven or gives you something better. You're expected to interpret the events around you in a certain way. And that turned out to not be true, where you always felt like that might not be true. So going through my day-to-day life, it's very difficult. I feel like I have to assess everything that I believe all the time, because growing up, I knew that something was off and I didn't listen to myself because, I wasn't in a position to believe myself. So I find it to be very difficult and laborious to go about life after leaving Islam because of how much thinking I've had to do my entire life and how much it's always not matched the reality that I was fed. We do have a caller, so let's take the caller on. I think the caller wants to talk about free will. That'll be interesting. So, hey, GafferBlue, can you hear me? Are you there?
Sorry, yeah, I can, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, welcome to the stream. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what you want to talk about today.
Right. Well, first of all, I have to say I'm a bit bamboozled by the fact that I can hear you talking, but at the same time you're here on this channel.
Yeah,
Is this?
there's a bit of a delay. Yeah.
I see. Right. Well, that's pretty magical. Right. So, oh, one moment. Right. Okay, I see what's happening.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not gonna introduce myself or anything. That'd be a bit, a bit of a bad idea. But
Uh,
yeah, you can call me, you can call me whatever you like, really. Um, but yeah, I'm an ex-Muslim from Bosnia, and as soon as I heard you talk about, free will and all that, I was like, I'm gonna jump in, real quick because it's been something that I've been actually wanting to, talk about with other people for some time now. I just never got the chance to, like,
mhm.
just today, really. And well, I mean, I did want to sort of just continue, listening to you and then join in once you were finished. So if you could,
Yeah, I don't think I had much more
I
to
say,
say about that. I mean,
yeah,
okay, here's to wrap it up maybe. I think that everyone is a summation of factors, and some of these factors add up to become your personality or will or some kind of agency, but it's not as free as we think it is. There's so much that goes into every decision that we make that um, I don't want to quote this study because I don't remember it exactly, but I do remember a commenter just wrote about it. There was a study where MRIs showed that you make a decision before you're even conscious that you made a decision. So it's hard to draw the line about, around where you are and what makes you you. I don't know if that makes sense. What do you think about the topic?
yeah. That's So about the study. Did you read this in detail, or is there like a difference between spur of the moment decisions and decisions that you make after thinking about it, or is it the same exact um outcome?
I have to look it up to cite it. To be honest, I don't remember, but I
Right.
think it was about something like choose one of the two items on the screen, and the some area of their brain lit up before they can even press the button or before they say that they've decided.
Yeah, but would that actually, mean that this constitutes the fact that they already decided, or was it just a response to the question being sort of assessed, let's say?
That is a good question. I'll tell you once I find the study again.
Right.
Um, but yeah, tell me your thoughts about the topic.
I do agree. So, objectively, I don't think there is as much agency because we're all sort of intertwined, and a lot of factors, built up to just this, present moment and the universe, the movement of the Earth. It's all pretty much predetermined, especially if I think about energy and all that. So there's no way things could have worked out, differently. We can talk about universes and whatever. I don't think that such a thing is possible, like parallel universes. But what I'm more interested in is how the perception of free will actually influences people. If there's it kind of sucks that we can't know this, but I'm just curious. So is there a difference in in a living outcome between people who sort of think that they are able to, influence their lives, and people who think they're doomed to just be whatever the world, requires or allows them to be. If you understand what I'm saying.
Can you rephrase that question?
Sure. Right. So what I'm more interested what I'm more interested in would be so how perception of, free will influences life outcome, if it does at all. Because as I said, there's no way to know, because if there's only one way, things can work out, there's nothing to compare them to. But I'm just wondering, so if I live my life thinking that I cannot change anything, that I cannot be agentive, would that mean that I am dooming myself to, missed chances and all that? How am I supposed to know if I am doing so, if there's only one way things, work out? But this fact that I see free will as such, is that what's influencing my life outcome, or is it the other way around? I'm sorry, I can't exactly phrase it. Like, I'm thinking about it as I'm saying it, but it's like expectations, I guess. If you think that things will go badly and they do go badly, did they go badly because you thought they would, or did you think they would because you knew they would?
I think I get what you mean.
Right.
So if someone believed that they have free will, is that as good as having it, basically?
Right. Yeah, pretty much.
Or if someone doesn't believe they have free will, is that a self-fulfilling prophecy where they feel like they don't have control over their actions?
Yeah, pretty much it.
Yeah, that's something that I'm personally struggling with. There was a time in my life where I didn't have agency or choice in a lot of things, and I'm concerned that I am projecting that onto the way that I view free will. I'm not sure if that's the reason why I view it that way, or if I actually am convinced that there is no free will. But I want to operate as if I believe that I have free will, or as if I believe that I am one of the people who can influence their choices enough to feel like they have free will.
Right. And what would you say is, making that difficult?
What is making it difficult? Because there's no objective way to know any of this. That's the most difficult part about it, is it's just thoughts. All of it from beginning to end is just thoughts. I don't feel like there's empirical evidence or tests that you can, or that I can personally do to figure out whether or not I have free will.
Right. What's kind of messy for me is like, it seems like it's different, system to system. For example, in my room, I can decide what to do, but at any one moment, I can only do one thing. So if I say I want to raise my hand, and I do it, after a moment, if my hand is still up, I can lower it, or I can raise it again. But I cannot guess what would have happened if I kept it lowered. And it's not really affecting anything. These actions are not, doing much. It's just my hand is going up and down in my room. And there's this, like, in this microcosm, I do have agency. It's just not affecting anything.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even that, I don't know if that constitutes agency, but I hear what you're saying. There's fewer factors to get in the way, and there's fewer options that are restricted for you.
Right. And fewer things affected by it. So I'm thinking, if free will is just a total of what you can do versus what the obstacles are, then I suppose free will does exist.
So most of the time that I thought about free will, at least in my earlier years, it was in the context of religion and belief, and how Islam describes free will. And that, I'm convinced, doesn't exist. I mean, just the fact that most people in a certain area believe the same thing, at least, before the age of the internet, should demonstrate that these people aren't all choosing the wrong thing with their free will, choosing to disbelieve in Islam, for example. It just shows that everyone is influenced by the people around them, and no one has as much agency as we attribute to them. Going past that, I still don't think that anyone has free will. We have certain personalities or tendencies based on experiences, based on biology, based on, excuse the phrase, but God knows what else.
Right.
We call that will or free will or self or personality or something of the sort. I think it's just a summation of a lot of factors that we don't fully understand.
Right. So this is not about the, the actual concept. Is just as it relates to Islam.
It's a bit of both. I mean,
Right.
what matters to me these days is not whether or not I have absolute free will. I'm convinced that I don't. But if I understand myself that way and try to understand the factors that influence my decisions, maybe that gives me more control when I'm cognizant of these factors. If I can preemptively get ahead of them. Say, for example, I am someone who cannot easily resist sweets. So if I don't stock sweets in my pantry, then I'm not going to eat them every night. So that's one way to get ahead of my impulses or tendencies or whatever biological tendencies without saying that I'm above them. So it's trying to hack your brain to figure out how to live a happy life without actually having free will.
Oh yeah. That actually just reminded me of so I do one thing I struggle with is, well, I kind of spend a lot. Um and it's like when I'm short on money, I'm like, I'm gonna save up. As soon as I get money, I spend it on like a lot of things. And I'm just wondering, so people who get over addiction, again, tying into this, what exactly causes them to get over their addiction? Is it a one, is it a momentary thing where, things just aligned for them and they're like able to let go of it? Or it, uh,
I mean,
right.
sometimes it's a difference in how their brain works. The brain of someone who's more prone to addiction, they could respond differently in their brain. It's not necessarily even a conscious decision.
Right. So, you know, I'm I'm just afraid that no matter how hard I try, I will likely not be able to get rid of this.
Well, you might
Like
not
things need to. Yeah, sorry, go on.
you might not get rid of it. You might not get rid of how whatever that makes you more prone to spending more money, but you can implement things that get in the way that help you not act on it mindlessly or thoughtlessly, let's call it, or impulsively.
That's a fair point. Mm.
So there's a question here. PTND is asking, how does this topic relate to ex-Muslims joining Islam again? How do you link the lack or presence of free will with being convinced of the claims made by Islam? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it 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 does in a lot of ways. I mean, so what would this, phase of being an ex-Muslim, um, what would its significance be if this was not my, conscious decision? If it's not, so like what exactly makes an ex-Muslim if I'm bound to go back anyway?
What makes an ex-Muslim if you're bound to go back?
Yeah, like what exactly am I? Um,
So if you left the religion, sorry, say it again. I'm not quite processing it.
yeah, so if I am a certain way right now,
Mhm.
and I'm prone to going back to how I was. Am I the way I am right now? Does that define me at all? Because what does a definition of a human being depend on what they are at any moment or what they have been throughout their existence?
So that makes me think of something that in Islam, for example, if you died an ex-Muslim, if you died a non-Muslim after having been a Muslim, you're going to hell. Even if, had you stayed alive for 2 more years, you could have returned back to Islam or something of the sort. So I
Right.
think in Islam, you are judged by the state that you're in when you die. Similarly, I'm sure you've heard this. If you die while you're praying, you get resurrected while you're praying. If you die doing something, you get resurrected doing that same thing. So it puts a lot of importance on that snapshot of who you are. But that is a good question. I think that who I am today and who I was a year ago are very different, even just a few days ago, and always will be very different. So it's not fair to judge me today based on who I've been in the past, or to judge me in the past based on who I am today.
Especially for a god who's not supposed to be bound by conceptions of time. Like, if he's beyond time, then the definition of a human being should also be beyond time.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And then again, it comes back to, if God understands all the factors and all the variance in it, why would God take offense to it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, one thing that I never understood would be all the judgment, even for, I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but even for Satan. So if Allah made him do the thing, made him disobey, because he makes everything happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the point of being the judge? It's like if I took, two toy figurines and I made them fight each other, and I make one of them, kill the other one, and then I like accuse them of being a bad person or something. It just reeks of spoiled brat behavior.
Yeah, it's I don't know how God gains any pleasure from things that happen the way that he wanted them to happen. I mean, how different are we really from the angels? Like, I've heard this said before, angels have no free will. They worship God because they're commanded to, but God gets an extra kick out of us worshiping it because we have free will, and the ones who choose are then extra special somehow. But are they really? I mean, God knew they were going to act that way. So are they any different than the angels?
Right. There is that, but there's also the fact that, I mean, this better because you're an Arabic speaker as well. But doesn't Allah say that not only does he know, but he also makes things happen the way he wants them to?
Honestly, I've been pretty much gaslit by a bunch of Muslims over the years who tell me, no, God doesn't decree what you're going to do. He doesn't decide it. He knows it. But there are hadiths that say that God wills what's going to happen before you're even born. So I don't know what to believe or what people believe.
Yeah, so I mean, it does definitely tie into the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
This topic, I mean.
PTND says, shouldn't you be convinced by the validity of the arguments presented rather than some assumed and vague ideas about free will, which also require their own evidence to establish? Validity of arguments about religion, is that what you're saying? Sorry, I didn't quite understand that. What do you think of this? Sheikh Raja says, when you act according to a plan, does that mean you act mindlessly? What do you think?
Oh, right. That's a nice paradox.
But does it though? Like, do you think that is mindless, or do you think that we are still culpable for acting according to the plan? Like Shaitan is culpable for acting according to a plan that God decided.
Right. I mean, this would sort of be like, I mean, it would be, different. It would be decided from the minute that you decide to go along with the plan or to reject it, as opposed to, you know, each action defining what you are, what your
Do
state of mind
yeah.
is.
Do you think Shaitan had a choice in whether or not to follow the plan?
That's also confusing. I'm still not sure. So, um, can you explain this to me actually? So, is he an angel in Islam or is he not an angel? And are there others like him?
I myself am confused by that. If there's one shaitan that's simultaneously whispering in everyone's ear, if they're a kind of jinn, it's not clear. But he was made of fire, right? Not like the
Right.
angels. So it all seems pretty predetermined, because if it didn't happen that way, if shaitan just bowed down to Adam, then we'd all be chilling with God in heaven. I don't know. It's similar to even in Christianity. If Adam and Eve didn't eat that first that fruit that they weren't supposed to eat, would we all be in heaven now? I don't think. I mean, if God determined that we will be on earth, then how disappointed would he be if no one ate the apple and we all just hung out in heaven and he created the earth for no reason?
Right. It's really, I mean, part of why it's hard to come to terms with it now is because it just, well, to me it does not make sense. What makes sense is why it's presented as this. Um, it's really just a perfect system to ensure that your followers do follow you, if
So
that makes sense.
yeah, I have something to say about the wait, the comment is stuck for some reason. Now it's gone.
Mhm.
So I think that a lot of us want to believe in free will so we can be able to blame people for things. So if you think that people have free will, then people who do bad things chose to do those bad things and deserve punishment, and therefore we can rest assured knowing that we laid the blame with them and punishment has been dealt and the world is fair and happy again. But if we don't believe in free will, or if we believe that it's more complicated than just bad people do bad things, then it becomes a lot more difficult to deal with. So, for example, if Muslims didn't believe in free will, they would understand why someone might not believe in their religion without necessarily being a bad person. But that's contradictory to the idea that someone who doesn't believe in Islam is a bad person. So it's simpler to believe in free will.
That was a handful. Right. I do understand what you're saying. And I think that is the hardest, topic to discuss with a Muslim, because I think most of the time so far I I would simply, cite that, well, if I am a kafir or whatever, it's because I was made to be. I did not have a fucking choice. No,
Mhm.
man, don't blame me, blame Allah. I don't really think I'm part of the conversation.
But I mean, you say that as a joke, but some people actually take it to mean that you believe in God and believe that God predestined you to be a kafir, which is a paradoxical position or oxymoronic position, that you believe in God but you don't. So is that what you mean?
Perfect. I mean, yes, but it's also one of the only points you can make when you're making the argument for why you're an ex-Muslim. Like I didn't have a choice in it.
But why do you feel like you have to make an argument for it?
Um, to safeguard myself, really.
To safeguard yourself from what?
I'm not sure if this has happened to you, but I've had Muslims getting kind of defensive, let's say. about me, stating opinions about Islam. So I do need to have some arguments ready for why I am the way I am.
Do you make them prove to you why they are Muslim, or convince you why it makes sense to be Muslim?
And no, like I said, so if Islam is to be believed, then I don't have a choice, therefore I'm not to blame.
No, I'm saying just this
Oh,
general
I see.
attitude that you have to prove yourself to them or your position to them. Do you require the same from them, that they have to prove Islam to you?
Actually, no, I've not tried that for a long time because it's always so it's really always been a show of solipsism for some reason. It's like we're talking, but I'm talking and they're talking at the same time. It's never been a dialogue.
So is there a way when you're having these conversations to turn it into a dialogue?
I think there's been, chances for that with Muslims who are sort of on the verge of either distancing themselves from Islam or people who are starting to have doubts, never with actually, devout believers, which is to be expected, I guess.
I don't know if I agree with that. Are you saying that it's not possible to have a dialogue with a believing Muslim unless they're already kind of on their way out or halfway out?
Maybe it depends on the major reason why they're Muslim. That makes sense. So, I've seen people awed by all the alleged, science in the Quran, and they just dismiss any sort of retorts to that.
I don't think, I mean, I've had many conversations with people asking them why they
Mm.
believe what they believe. And I'm fairly certain most of them don't believe because of scientific miracles. They already believe, and then they see something called a scientific miracle that sounds legitimate. And through conversations with them, I've had so many admit that to me. They say, yeah, you know what? I don't build my belief on this. So it's a tricky conversation to have, but I think that even with a devout Muslim, it could be possible to have a dialogue. It's just that they're primed to have the conversation in one way only. And that's what makes you defensive and have to prove your case to them rather than always making them prove their case to you.
I see. I mean, have you been sort of, keeping track of what the responses have been so far? What is the major reason for belief in your
Um,
experience?
so I'm biased in my recollection. I didn't record everyone's reason, and I don't have a statistical, analysis of all this. Um, from what I recall, there were many who either noticed it even before the conversation or at the end of the conversation, but noticed the importance of the indoctrination component in their belief. There were many who said, I know that I'm a Muslim mostly because I was raised a Muslim. And, I like that self-awareness. And there were many who have mentioned reasons like the scientific miracles and things like that. And I try to ask them, when did you first hear about these things? What was your belief rating out of 10 at the time? How confident were you of your belief before hearing about the scientific miracles? How more confident do they make you feel? And what if I disprove one of these miracles? Does that change how much you believe? Does that change your confidence level? And in answering those questions and having those discussions, they themselves realize that often they're not building their belief on any of those reasons. So let me explain it this way. If someone has, this is a model that I see very often with believers in Islam, they would have 10 reasons, why they believe something, or 10 reasons they give you. And if you knock one down or two down or three down, their strength of faith doesn't go down to 70% because you've taken down 3 reasons. It's still 100%. And none of these reasons on their own are actually definitive or proving anything. But there's this idea in Islam or in Dawah circles that if you have 10 kind of good reasons, they add up to one very good reason. And that's not how it works. So quickly, they themselves realize that they're not building their faith on reasons, or at least not the ones that they've listed, not in the way that we would think of how you would come to any other conclusion. And often they realize they just believe for other reasons, and these reasons are the ones that they say outwardly.
So they're never actually conscious of what the, you know.
I mean, some people are surprisingly conscious of or self-aware, and they say, yeah, it's because of indoctrination mostly. And if I was born into another religion, I'd be saying the same thing. And that is refreshing and rare. I mean, not super rare, but it's not the most common. But most of the time, yeah, you'd hear the reasons that you've heard from Dawah people. And when you try to demonstrate how some of these reasons are faulty, they fall back on other reasons, and it doesn't affect their belief one bit. So I don't think it builds their belief in any way.
Right. Yeah. I'm just wondering. So it would, definitely be interesting if similar conversations could be had with some of the more extremist believers.
Yeah, they can be. I mean, I feel like I enjoy the conversations that I have with everyday Muslims on this channel, but I think it's time to have a discussion with one of those Muslims of the platform, because every time that happened in the past, it has demonstrated to me and to them that they're not as confident in what they're saying when they're talking to someone who's somewhat competent in having a discussion. So it'll be very interesting to see how they do outside of their own circles, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, have you had a chance to actually discuss this with a more traditionalist, let's say, Muslim?
The
I
thing
can't really
about
find the words for it. Sorry.
yeah, it's happened a few times that a Dawah person on TikTok at the time would come up on one of my live streams and join and start talking to me, and I have those posted here on YouTube, but I've never arranged it personally.
I see.
And yeah.
Because I'm just wondering. So, if you've had people say that they know they're indoctrinated, I'm just curious what the answer would be from, these people that we just mentioned. If they were brought to that point where they had nothing else to say, would it be some sort of emotional outburst, or?
I mean, from what I've seen, it has been, we didn't exactly talk about that topic, but like someone was telling me about watching the stream recently with a guy called Riyadh Muslim. And the whole time he was saying, I'm just confused, bro. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm confused. And I feel like he was hiding behind this alleged confusion. Maybe he was actually confused, but he wasn't able to engage with the points that I was making or the questions that I was asking. And another guy asked me why I don't have intercourse with donkeys. So no, I haven't had an engaging conversation with a Dawah person yet, I gotta say.
Right, yeah, some interesting questions there. Geez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I've seen someone suggesting that I have a discussion with Dawah over Dunya. I haven't watched that channel, but I'm curious. Leave a suggestion in the comments, under the live stream, not in the live chat, but who I should have a conversation with.
Would that be the guy on? I'm not sure if he's on TikTok.
No idea.
Right. I think I know this guy. Yeah. This. Okay. Yeah. That would be interesting. I'm not sure you'll get far with him though.
I don't know, but sometimes it's educational to see it happen, even if we don't get far in the conversation. It's good to see how we got to that point.
That's fair.
Ah,
Um, so what makes me kind of wonder about Islam really is, if I have reasons why I left, is it really the same way for me? Do I really know what my reasons are for not, being a Muslim?
that's a good question. So, how self-aware are you as someone who doesn't believe in something? Is what you're asking.
Yeah, I literally cannot, pinpoint the exact moment when I said, okay, that's it. I'm gone. It happened very, very gradually. Um,
I
I
question myself
yeah.
all the time, but I always fall back on realizing that I'm only giving this one theory or this one hypothesis, this one explanation for the universe, Islam. I'm giving it more time and consideration and rethinking only because I grew up in it. I don't spend this much time thinking about Christianity and second guessing my reasons why I don't believe in Christianity. So it's good to be self-aware, and it's good to do reflection and always be open to the possibility that you're wrong, but don't forever be stuck in this one in between. It's either Islam or it's not. Try to spend some time thinking about other religions and why you don't believe in them. That might be more productive.
Yeah, that's kind of been challenging. I mean, I've actually been considering going to church, just to see what that would be like. Um, but with Islam, it's been really wild. Like I have all these different theories. Like if this God is supposed to be some sort of manipulator, some sort of planner, deceiver, am I, sh- the let's say those sorts of things. That was very, very early on. It's like, am I being tested? Am I being this? Am I being that? Um, and I mean, it's probably naive of me to, think this way, but at some point I was like, I don't really want to live forever. I don't really want to get to, paradise or whatever. And even if there is hell, I don't see why I deserve it just for not, going along with things that I don't find to be to my liking.
For me, it's not just things that I don't find to be to my liking. It's things that don't seem to agree with each other, that don't seem to agree with what makes sense or logic, or again, each other. Because I know that often believers will ask, well, how do you know what makes sense? What's your reference for what reality is? It's not just that it doesn't agree with reality, it isn't consistent with itself. So that's my issue with it. Sorry,
What are some of these things?
like the primary one is free will and predestination. They
Right. Yeah,
don't
I get
seem
that.
consistent. But also there's so many little things that like how do I describe this? The simpler explanation is some guy came up with it than suspending your disbelief and saying, hypothetically, if a infinitely powerful God was to exist and decided to do things that way, it's possible. I mean, hypothetically, God could have given license to one guy specifically to have more women than anyone else, hypothetically. But why? Why does he act like every other cult leader? Like what makes him special? I mean, just specifically talking about this one thing, why did God make Muhammad so suspiciously similar to other cult leaders? Why couldn't he make an example by showing, if I were to send a real prophet, it's not going to fit any of the criteria of a cult leader, rather than this is an extra special cult leader and it's not a cult because God said so. Um, it's just that we're spending too much time thinking and rethinking whether we're the crazy ones or whether there's something that we missed or we're being tested in some diabolical reverse psychology kind of way. But at the end of the day, why? I mean, I've seen expressions of love that are way healthier from human beings than I have seen from God's religion. Why does God need to test us in these diabolical ways, and what does he gain to stand from it? I don't understand that.
I mean, right. So you more or less know why you're an ex-Muslim, but do you know when you became this
It
way?
was a gradual process, and it's been many years. I think that part of what held me back from being an ex-Muslim for many years is realizing that that's a thing. I just thought I was a bad Muslim, and there might have existed other bad Muslims like myself, or people who came from a Muslim background but do very un-Islamic things. But it didn't cross my mind that a normal or a good person could leave Islam. It just didn't make any sense to me till I actually saw people doing it. So there were many years where I would have been an ex-Muslim had I understood that it's possible, that it's physically possible to leave Islam, but I didn't think that was an option. So yeah, it's a confusing mess of a time between the time that I really had doubts and stopped behaving like a Muslim and the time that I realized that I'm an ex-Muslim, or I actually have left the religion. But it's been many years since either of those times.
Oh, wait. So you're saying that you did not, you sort of ascribed to those policies that Muslims generally ascribe to until you saw other people,
No,
openly
not at
express
all. Like,
that they're
I
okay.
had doubts, but it wasn't doubts in the legitimacy of the religion per se. It was doubts in my own sanity. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
something wasn't making sense and it's not adding up. What am I missing? What's wrong with me? And it was only when I realized that this has been discussed in length, and there are people who left the religion who aren't the devils that I was taught that they were, or, didn't leave the religion because they want to drink and all that kind of talk that I genuinely believed up until that point. So it wasn't that I came across ex-Muslims and then I stopped using fallacious logic. That's when I realized that it is indeed fallacious logic, and I'm not crazy.
Right. So you just kind of stumbled on an objective contradiction.
I mean, from a very young age, I've had issues with a lot of things in Islam, but I didn't see them as issues with Islam. I saw them as issues with me.
And
Mhm.
gradually this became you, learning, let's say, that it's not you, it's how
It's,
it should be.
yeah, I mean, to give you a very simple example is Sulaiman trying to, I don't know if you remember the story of Sulaiman and the queen of Saba, or the ruler of the people of Saba, and he was trying to impress her, to make her join his religion. And part of it was by having a jinn bring her throne to his city immediately. And I thought to myself, how does that prove Islam? Like, if people controlled jinn at the time, and this guy could control jinn faster than anyone else, how does that prove Islam? A lot of these stories seemed very idealistic, and not even, aside from not realistic, they didn't convey the point that they thought they did to me. But I thought I missed something. And then realizing that there's a simpler explanation, and it's just none of this actually happened, and it's just a story, that makes a lot more sense. That's most likely what the truth is.
Right. That is the first time I actually heard of that. I might, I might read up on it, but no, I never heard of this story. Is it is it one of the surahs, or?
I can't remember exactly where the details are from. Like, I know it from a very young age, from books about Qasas al-Anbiya, so I can't remember. But just look up the story of Sulaiman and Malikat Saba, and you'll see the details.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what? It's been sort of running around in my head as we talked. So have you seen like these comments about how we say that we're ex-Muslims because we can't let go of Islam? Like we have to label ourselves that because we're forever bound by it or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that?
So I'll tell you, for example, why I call myself an ex-Muslim. Like, in my day-to-day life, that never comes up. You know why? Because everyone in my life doesn't give a shit about religion. At least most of the people that I associate with these days. But if I lived in a Muslim country, everyone always talks about religion all the time. It just comes up in so many different contexts. Life is seen through the lens of being a Muslim. And I don't fault them for that. If you genuinely believe that there's torture and reward at the end of life, it makes sense that everything you say has to be through the lens of belief. But it's exhausting for someone who doesn't believe, or could be potentially exhausting. So I don't need to identify as ex-Muslim in an environment where people don't hound me about being a Muslim. But if I were in an environment where everyone expects me to behave like a Muslim, it's not even like Muslims make it seem like if you just shut up about Islam, you're going to have a happy life. That's not necessarily the case. Most people a lot of people get in trouble for not behaving Muslim enough, not because they came out and said, I don't like Islam and here's why. Even though it's their right to say that, most ex-Muslims get in trouble for not being Muslim enough and being called out for not being Muslim enough. So it's being around Muslims and Islam being practiced and being repressive towards those who leave it. That's what makes it important for us to identify ourselves and each other and find each other and let each other know that you're not a terrible person for not finding Islam convincing. Heck, for finding it laughable even. That doesn't make you a bad person. So when the day that the label is no longer necessary, when that day comes, when people are free to believe or not believe, when people aren't going to be demonized for not behaving Muslim enough, then I don't need the label ex-Muslim anymore.
Right. Yeah. I mean, same here. It's kind of funny though. I've just been scrolling through Reddit, and as pretty much as soon as you brought up not behaving Muslim enough, I see this post about how this guy's wife like refused him sex, and he's like he asked for why, and right. I'll just sum up. So he kind of, forced her because there's no, she can't refuse him and all that. And then when they were done with it, she slammed the door behind her, and they had a talk about why she did that. And she, said that, well, you have it easier, you should be grateful because you're a man and all that. And now he's asking for advice about that. I'm curious what the comments are, but I'm probably not going to open that. But yeah, just to say it was an interesting coincidence there.
That Islam is brought up in the bedroom?
No, that you get in trouble for not being up to up to expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't necessary. I mean, you don't hear the label ex-Christian, for example, because most of the time, if you're in a country that's mostly Christian and you left religion, it's presumed that you're an ex-Christian. And it's not unheard of that if someone says I'm an atheist, it's presumed ex-Christian most of the time. Or, I used to be religious, I'm not anymore. You assume ex-Christian. But the challenges that we face as ex-Muslims, though ex-Christians can relate, and sometimes, especially on those in more conservative Christian families, can relate even more with us ex-Muslims. On a larger scale, I think that our challenges they're still in their infancy compared to what ex-Christians had to go through many years ago. So it is important for us to identify ourselves because of the persecution that we face by believers, including people in our own family sometimes. And it's not always about violence. Like, it can just be as benign as social exclusion and vilification. And like I said, the way that you see Muslims conversing with ex-Muslims on their own channels is always some kind of pathetic title, like, ex-Muslim gets owned and humiliated and all that kind of shit. It's just how they treat us. So why would we identify as one of them? Why can't we identify as ourselves?
Yeah, I do. I do agree. I am curious. I've been watching you for a while, and and I'd really like to know what your reaction was. So, I do know that AP does things a bit differently, Apostate Prophet. So maybe he's sort of bound to incite some sort of, let's say, inflammatory reaction or whatever, from Muslims. At the very least, right now, I think he's changed his approach. I don't even think he's talking about Islam anymore, but never mind that. But you've been the same from the start, and what I've seen is that you still sort of had negative receptions, like you were either, threatened, or people felt like they were being attacked by you, and despite you not actually, addressing anyone personally, but just, talking about the religion. So how do you feel about, because, for me, if I bring up this topic with like family or something, they either tell me to, not talk about it. They're not offended or anything. They don't want to engage, or I'm told that I hate them for some reason. So how do you deal with this attitude of, if you're criticizing it, that means you hate us.
Hmm. Well, perseverance, really. I mean, if I were to never have these live streams, if I were to just make videos where I'm talking about, what Muhammad did or some story or another, then there'd be no way for me to convey to Muslims who I really am, because they'll just be going off of, this guy is criticizing us, he hates us, he hates our religion, he's a hateful person, and they don't get a chance to hear me talk off the cuff without a script. So that impression sticks with them, and some, even after listening to these live streams, still think the same way. But a lot of them, if they do for some reason listen to one of these live streams, they realize that the callers and themselves might have had the wrong impression of me, and I think that's part of what keeps me going, is demonstrating to them, I can think that Muhammad did bad things. I can make a satirical cartoon about a story that involves Muhammad, and I still don't have to be a hateful person, and I still don't have to hate Muslims or ridicule them. That I can not like an idea or even satirize it or even ridicule it and still not be the monster that they describe me to be. But it is difficult, and it's exhausting. I'm not gonna lie.
Right, I do understand. I mean, you have been, doing a great job so far, and I did always want to say that ever since I saw that cartoon, I shared it with pretty much everyone I know. It's it was unexpected to actually find something like that on YouTube, especially with the controversy with this religion and cartoons, if you understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I'm trying to do with these cartoons. Is I don't have the prophet drawn for the point of offending people or for the point of drawing him as an ugly figure or a disfigured shape. I had the artist draw him just as a regular man might have looked at the time, and I know that he was described in Islam to be very pale and fair skinned, but I refuse to follow that description, because I feel like it's fetishizing paleness too much. That's a thing in Islam that I don't understand. That I think is just an extension of how they thought at the time. But anyway, aside from his skin tone, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong about how I drew him. And I'm trying to demonstrate that the point of drawing him in a story is as a device to convey the point of the story, or to show you how ridiculous the story would be if you visualize it. It's not to make fun of him as a figure, like as a shape, and it's not to piss people off. But of course, people are not going to like that. But I try to demonstrate through my actions that I don't intend to offend with it, but I'm not going to stop because people are offended by it.
I mean, likely, if you let's say, put together a very large budget and got amazing actors to play the part, and just sort of whoa, subtly the irony, the hilariousness, the ridiculousness into the story and made it an actually, really good picture, I believe, still received the same reception. So
Mhm.
just wanted to say, great job with that.
Thank you. I
But
appreciate it.
yeah,
I want to
great.
explain this comment. Zayn is asking fetishizing paleness. Yeah, I find that in Islam, I think, again, that's an extension of how men in that area thought. But very often when a woman is being described, for example, in the hadith and described as being beautiful, they'd say like she was very fair or pale and beautiful, or the palest in the land, or the most beautiful in the land, and also she's fair. Um, and when the prophets were being described with piousness, like I can't remember which prophet putting their hand in their pocket and pulling it out and it's pale white. Like there's this obsession with paleness as a good virtue, and that those who have done good deeds, their faces will be pale. Those who have done bad deeds, their faces will be blackened. I think that it's superstition and it's aesthetics preferences that I don't agree with. So I didn't want to draw the prophet pale in agreement with the description.
Right. I mean, I do sort of recall there have been depictions of him, right? Before, I mean, visual depictions.
I think so. I mean, there's a few
Yeah.
that always come up when you Google the prophet's drawing, like old depictions of him.
Right. And I think I saw like a very early one where he's not exactly pale or dark skinned, but sort of like in the middle. And then they got progressively paler until they stopped depicting, until they just stopped, drawing him at all,
Hmm.
which kind of confuses me because if this was not a doctrine from the start, when did it start again? Like this, not not being allowed to depict him.
I'm not sure. I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't know if I ever knew, actually. I know that it was like it's always been a sentiment in Islam that if you leave a people with a drawing of something, they'll end up worshiping it, I think. So that's why you shouldn't draw the prophet. So I don't know. Or it's similar to the idea that you shouldn't have drawings at home because the angels wouldn't enter your house or something like that. Um, yeah, I remember I had an Arabic book from like a Saudi school. I didn't go to that school, but I had an Arabic book from there, and every drawing of an animal. I don't remember any humans being drawn, but every drawing of an animal would have a black line through their neck. And I asked a parent of mine at the time, why is there a black line on their neck? And they said that some people believe it is haram to depict or draw anything because it's like you're creating that thing. So you draw that line to kind of as a nod to Allah that I'm not saying I'm a creator, so I'm not going to depict this thing as perfect to offend you in any way.
Right. Yeah. Whoa. But wouldn't it be interesting to ask, Muslims, why they still use digital media, for example, because that's a lot of moving pictures.
I mean, most Muslims thankfully don't think that way, but I think Saudi Arabia had to struggle with that around the early 2000s and before that. The idea of I can't remember which mufti it was, but they were arguing that the Earth is indeed flat, but it was during an era of aviation already. So they have to abandon these ideas to get along with the rest of the world.
Right. It is confusing though. So if you're not supposed to, if you're not supposed to imitate God, and you're animating things, and animating, by definition means to instill a soul into something. It's very ironic that there are animators, let's say Muslim animators, or people who simply consume animation today who are Muslim.
I'm glad that
So,
Muslims don't follow to the T. Otherwise, you and I would have had a lot of restrictions that may have prevented us from being exactly where we are today. And it's not just, from a
That's true.
selfish point of view, but I'm glad that Muslims aren't as restricted as they should be according to the religion.
I know, but it's just funny to think about it. Um,
Yeah.
if there, yeah, like if there are all these rules, are they only meant to be followed, unless not following them inconveniences you in some way? Like for example, let's say that weapons of mass destruction were for some reason included in the Quran and marked as forbidden. Would they still develop them just to sort of keep up with the other?
I think there's a way around anything. And I think that even believers find, look at the Jewish faith, for example. They're known for arguing ways around rules. So I think humans in general are always going to find a way to survive.
Kind of like playing, right? It's, oh gosh. So I just hope that, if it has been changed, it has been changed definitely. Since it's inception. I'm just hoping that it comes around to a point where some of the rules that are followed today, like, well, dietary restrictions, like the inherent sexism, that's also discarded at the very least. Like, I don't really care what exactly what happens to the religion, how many members it has. I would just like to see it changed.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I don't care whether people believe in God or not. And that's why I often don't engage much with arguments against the possibility of an existence of a God or for the existence of a God. What I care about is how people's actions and behaviors is affected by that, and whether it harms them or other people. That's what matters. So if there's a version of Islam that gives people comfort and doesn't harm them or the people around them, I hope that it prevails.
Right, yeah, same here. But yeah, actually, speaking of which, have you ever thought about, um, so obviously this is not correct as we can see from reality, but do you think do you think that religion does anything to control chaos? Societally.
To
Is it
control
is
chaos?
is it a useful tool in sort of ordering society?
I think it was at some point, for many, many years. But I don't know if it's as useful as it once was before. We're living in a very new era that is, I don't think most of us realize how fast-paced change has been lately. For thousands of years, change was very, very gradual on a local and international level, or global level. There were no nations in that sense at the time. But now everyone's connected. Now economies are connected. The entire world is connected. Transportation and money and beliefs and communication. I don't think I know enough to tell you if religion is now a net positive or not. I know that in the past it played a bigger role than it does now in coordinating people to work together and social cohesion and all that sort of stuff, and explaining things about reality that people didn't understand. But I think that a lot of it has been superseded by, or surpassed by, the knowledge that we've gained about the world around us. And instead of going to, a faith healer, we go to a doctor. And instead of just praying to God, we look up the answer. So there might still be a role for religion, but it doesn't play the same role that it used to in the past. And I don't think enough time has passed in this new, communicative, accessible, international world for us to know how it's going to go in the future.
Right. So it's not what it used to do is now being done by something else.
It's not even that it used to do one thing. There's so many things that
Mhm.
religion played a role in that it doesn't anymore, or it would be actually the opposite of beneficial. It would be harmful for religion to play a role in those things. when it was better than nothing in in the past. So it's hard to say.
Right. Great. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Thanks
This
for
was very
calling
interesting
in.
from the start. Great.
Yeah.
Right. I'll be logging off now, and right, you can wrap up the stream. Thanks so much.
Of course. And I hope you have a
Bye-bye.
great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks again to the caller. So today we didn't get to speak with ex-Muslims, unfortunately. We did speak with someone who was on the verge of returning first, and then I answered a few questions, and then we had another caller. But I appreciate everyone for being here and for contributing with their questions, with their likes. I don't see as many likes as I see views. It's so bizarre today. We've got 100 viewers plus. Okay, the likes have caught up. My bad. But still, if you haven't liked the stream already, do like it now. And let me know what you would like to have me talk about or interview people about in the next stream. And let's see, can you still hear me? Yes, you can. And as always, I want to give a thank you to my patrons, YouTube members, and everyone who has donated to help this channel. Without you, this would not be possible. I haven't updated the list of Patreon members yet and YouTube members yet, but I will do that soon. And another reminder, if you join as a member or YouTube patron, you get to join the Discord server. And it is a very interactive and fun community that I recommend that you join. And I hope to see you there. And as always,